counted among the outlaws. He said, "Come, follow me." People from all walks of life since have been becoming outlaws.
Welcome to Becoming Outlaws. This is a podcast which engages celebrities, scholars, diverse voices in different candid conversations about following Jesus, defying societal norms, and exploring profound, and often they're not very profound sometimes, questions of faith. We got a different one for you today. With all the news being on the war in Israel, it's easy nearly to forget there's still a war going on that's very serious in Ukraine. Society, civilizations, and wars can never be fully understood without adding the context of belief. Religion and worldview are always at a core. Ukraine and Russia are no different, even though their history is long and complex. Ukraine is a nation with a rich tapestry of religious traditions, a history steeped in resilience. In this land where faith has often been a source of unity and solace, it's also been a battlefield of beliefs. It's entangled with political, cultural, and national identity. Our aim today at a high level is to explore how these deeply held beliefs have played a pivotal role in the ongoing war with Russia. And we'll seek to understand the intricate connections between faith and this fight for sovereignty. And to help us out, we have with us the founder and president of Hope for Ukraine, Yuriy Boyechko. Did I get it right?
Yes.
I practiced and then I just stumbled on it. Sorry about that. Hey, thanks for joining me today. So this, I'm kind of the naive Western here and not an expert in that part of the world. And we see Russia, I'm speaking, of course, on behalf of lots of people. Maybe they are experts, I don't know, but a lot of us, we know there's Russia, the surrounding countries, maybe think of Russia and the Cold War and communism and the bad guys in most of our movies, but the peripheral countries, and Ukraine's not a nobody. I mean, they're second largest in that area to Russia, I believe. And so we all know there's this awful war going on, but I wanted you to help us understand kind of what the opening is what's the war about? What are the faith undertones? What's a little bit of history of Ukraine and the religious belief? And I think to start that off would be great to kind of hear your story, where you're from and how you grew up.
Yes. Thanks for having me, Ken. And I just, as I look back, it always brings me back to my childhood in Ukraine. So, I was born when there was still a communism. So in the communist regimes, you can practice religion, you can, go to work, buy things, but everything is dictated by the state. And when I was 6 years old, my father, who is a Protestant minister, bishop in Ukraine, he was taken and put to jail for 3 years. And one of the reasons, and the main reason why he was placed in jail, is because he would not comply with the state regulations on religion at that time. So basically, the way it would work is that, okay, you want to open a church, you want to open Protestant church, or whatever church you want to open, you have to go to the state. You gotta get the paperwork, right? And then they'll tell, okay, this is what you need to talk every time you have a meeting. This is talking points, right? And these state-run churches basically would always have one of the KGB agents present there to monitor, to make sure that you follow the script that they gave it to you. So they basically give you every week talking points, right? And since my father didn't want to oblige to these rules and regulations because he believed in freedom of religion, freedom of speech, his church, his ministry would not register with the state. So me as a child, I remember, we didn't have we couldn't even have a meeting place. Like you cannot have a church in one place. So we would have meetings every Sunday at the different houses.
Hmm.
So this way, if you have KGB agents who would follow us, they would not know where would be the next meeting. So it's like right now when you think about it, it sounds crazy, but like I remember we used to live on a second floor apartment in center of Lviv, Ukraine, and I remember on Sunday morning we would have a stream of these people coming up the stairs to our apartment. We have a pretty not a big apartment, but we have 60, 70 people cramped into the living room. So
Wow.
I remember my bedroom, we would have, because it used to be, especially when in the winter time, we would have a pretty cold weather. So everybody would come in with these big jackets, hats, and stuff like that. And I remember in my room on my bed, we would have a stack this tall of just the jackets and hats of everybody who came to the service. And I remember, so the meetings would be in private homes. And every Sunday, there would be a different home that we would have to meet to make sure that you don't have no KGB people coming in and shut you down and arrest everyone. And all our neighbors, thank God we had good neighbors, but they would always be very supportive, right? So when we would start singing like songs, preaching and prayers, they would not report us to KGB. But in the end of the day, that's why my father went to prison because of that. So and it brings back to what's going on right now, because basically what you see right now in Ukraine, and even the way the churches and religion is operating right now in Russia, in order for you to be stayed open, you have to completely follow the state talking points, right? So there is no such thing as you can practice free religion. If you want to stay open as a church, it has to be monitored by the state. You have to follow the policies and politics of the state. And then, in Ukraine, when you look at the history of Ukraine, we were under Russian rule, under Soviet Union until 1991, right? When we got, freedom, independence. But, at that time, a big part of Ukraine, especially eastern side of Ukraine, was a lot of folks would belong to Russian Orthodox Church. So in Russia, Russian Orthodox Church is a state church. So basically, whatever, if Russian regime, Russian president say, you know what, we're gonna go and throw the nuclear bomb, the Russian Orthodox, the head, they would bless and actually say, you know what, you can go ahead and do it. So basically, it's completely, controlled, and it's so. And as the Russian Orthodox Church was growing and stuff like that in Ukraine, it also brought that regime with it, right? The policies that and now once this war started, a lot of the spying, a lot of propaganda were still infiltrated Ukrainian society through that arm of Russian regime, which called a Russian Orthodox Church. So when I was 6, I'll bring back to my my life. So my father was taken to prison, then he was released, and then the wall fell. The 1991, the independence came in. So after the country's been under authoritarian rule for over 70 years, it takes a long time for it to rebuild. But the freedom and democracy start to blossom. Churches start to be open up, and then there's been we've been independent for 30 years, right? And that taste of freedom of speech, freedom of religion is something that always been stuck in the throat of current president of Russia, which is Putin, and that desire to be free and independent country was against his desires and his wishes. So, and that's why this war, full-scale war, broke out in 2022, and is going on for already almost 2 years, because he wants Ukraine and to be under his influence. And Ukrainian people, they're freedom-loving, democracy-loving people. They don't want to go back. They don't want to go back to where we used to be, because this is not a pretty life to live. People who never lived under communism, they have no idea. I remember as a child. I remember my parents, my oldest brother. They would have to go and stand in line at like 5 o'clock in the morning and wait till the store opens to get the 2 gallons of milk. So you gotta go stand in line. So you have Tuesdays and Thursdays, this is when they bring you bread. Like Monday and Wednesdays, this is when you can get the milk, and it's like one truck a day. So once they sell it out, the store closes and everybody goes home. You go into the supermarket, there's only one type of product, right? Everything is controlled, right? From what kind of clothes you can wear, what kind of car you can drive, who can leave the country. There is no such thing like people who are free. Like it's like living, it's living in prison, but prison without walls. Because in the end of the day, everything is controlled by the government. So that's basically what it is. The fight is about is Putin and Russia trying to recreate Soviet Union, and Ukraine is not gonna sign off and not gonna sign up for that, basically. And that's why what you see right now is definitely a fight between good and evil on a different level. So it's really complex, to be quite frank.
Yeah. Do I understand this right? So with the Russian Orthodox Church, it is not just in Russia, it's in Ukraine. And is this kind of a good comparison? If we were looking at Roman Catholicism, for instance, there's a Vatican, but then they're in charge of the churches in different countries. So if you have a Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, it's being governed by Russia, which is being governed by the state of Russia. So then you have churches within your country being run by basically probably the government. And is that causing conflict? Is there suspicion in those Russian Orthodox churches? Are they being attended, or what's the situation there?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically a lot of propaganda and a lot of stuff that we see over the years was actually done through Russian Orthodox Church, because just like back in the old days, if you want to stay open, you had to follow the script that you receive every week. The same thing these Russian Orthodox churches, and it's not only in Ukraine, but also a lot of post-Soviet countries. They have presence of these churches, right? And basically, a government using Russian government using these priests to brainwash their parishioners with Russian propaganda and Russian. So it's a state-run propaganda machine that uses religion as a cover-up. In the end of the day, that's why it's been. Again, you got to understand that. In Ukraine, there's so many different churches, so many different religion groups, right? We have big Jewish population. We got, Armenian church. We got Seventh Day Adventists, all kinds, right? And but everyone, but specifically that arm and that church, if you can call it a church, has been used uh, heavily by the government in order to cause chaos, cause in country, splits, and and just push propaganda then day in and day out in order to sway the minds of the believers to so they need to follow whatever Russia says. So
Yeah.
that's how it is.
What would you say? I'm not expecting you to have percentages off the top of your head, but in general, what's the predominant religions? Are they mainly Greek Orthodox? You're Protestant. How large is that? Can't be very well. You were meeting in communism in houses. Can't be very big, but has it grown? Is it growing?
Yeah.
In Armenian here typically is Catholic. Is it the same there?
Yeah.
So
So the two predominant religions now. So we have Ukrainian Orthodox, right? Ukrainian Orthodox Church that reports to Greek Orthodox. Then you have Catholics that report to Pope. Then since the independence 1991, the Protestant movement has been a very big in Ukraine as well. So I mean, I would say if you would, I don't know exact numbers, but I would say it's about 30%, 30% Catholics, 30% Ukrainian Orthodox. Russian Orthodox used to play a big part too, but now it's been dwindling down
sure.
that footprint. I would like to say that, and then Protestants, I would say they about maybe 10 to 15% of the entire mix of different religion groups.
Yeah, and for those listening who aren't tracking with what the differences are, some people aren't sure even what Protestant is as far as, so I'm going to do a quick explanation. The best I know it, you can correct me, but so you have Orthodox is basically stems from Roman Catholic, other than they don't see the Pope as the authority, if my understanding's right. And then in both of those camps, what makes them different than Protestant, besides all the details of the way they worship, is they believe in scripture along with church council as being equal. So sometimes it conflicts with scripture, but it doesn't matter because the church decides is God's voice. It's kind of, to me, how I define Catholicism. And then Orthodox is kind of Catholicism, but without the leadership of the Pope. And then when it comes down to Russian Orthodox and Ukraine Orthodox and all that, is that really just a separation of who's running it, which state's running it, but it's pretty much the same belief system?
Yeah, it's the same belief system. It's just who they report to.
Yeah. And then Protestants, for those listening, would be those that do believe scripture has all truth entailed and that salvation comes by faith alone and by no works, where the other
Correct.
ones add on an adherence to a church organization as a mediator kind of between you, God, and man. So there's like you, church, and God. And Protestantism says, no, it's you and God and divine revelation, divine, intimate salvation, and that there's no more mediator because Christ is the mediator.
Correct.
Which then Protestants would involve all the denominations, which would be
Yeah. So it's, I mean, we got everyone, Lutherans, we got Pentecostals, Charismatics, Seventh Day Adventists. Yeah, so that's, I think, that's been the biggest the biggest growth we've seen is actually the Protestant movement in
which to
Ukraine.
me is always the case.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
goes along with the freedom. If people find out that they can have a direct relationship through Christ to God, that's freedom. Freedom
yeah,
away from
yeah,
the rules, and the rules aligns you to the rules of a church, which in these cases has been abused all through history, even if that's the right or wrong path, because they're aligned to states. And
yeah.
from the beginning of Catholicism, the Roman emperor made Roman Catholicism to align and control religion, because religion is powerful.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, like right now, I mean, uh, you know, uh, you still find a lot of open air meetings in Ukraine, which is, back in the 90s. Uh, I mean, you've seen crusades almost every weekend.
Yeah.
It's just so when the wall fell down, a lot of Western missionaries moved in, and it's been awesome to see how the taste of freedom is changing society. I mean, we still have a long way to go as a society, because there's always the talk about corruption, this and that, and I totally get it, because once you have the society that's been under oppression for so many years, you give them freedom and they don't really know what to do with it. So you gotta give it time. You gotta give it time for them to get adjusted to be free, and be make right choices. So that's why I think, in the end of this war, when it's going to be finished, I believe that Ukraine is going to be set on a different course. And, the mentality of people is going to be completely changed. And I think in 15, 20 years from now, God willing, you will see Ukraine as a leading nation around the world, as far as the freedom, as far as the liberty, as far as the value of things that are eternal. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because the price that we're paying right now as a society is way too high. And I think the corruption and all the stuff that we've been experiencing in the past is going to be driven away because of what the nation had to go through these past 2 years.
Under communism, which is basically an atheist philosophy, as far as if you put it under religion, it's more of a, I guess, a world view, but yet the Russian Orthodox Church never went away. Why? Right? I mean, I was watching a documentary, and I know a couple decades. Well, I watched it recently, but it was about a couple decades back, where a few decades, because it was still under communism, I believe, and people were hurting, people not having enough to eat and starving, but yet there was a $1 billion church being built. And they're spending above that $12 million just on icons and decorations inside the building. And it made me think, like, not to judge other faiths, because, everyone goes to where they're at spiritually and where their knowledge is at. But to me, while people are starving in the street and you're building $1 billion church in the name of Christ, when New Testament teaches that the true religion is to help the poor and help the widow, and
Sure.
which is why a Protestant, or people that are actually being moved by the Spirit, realize that we are the church, and that
Correct.
the sacredness lives in us, and it's to reach humanity. It's not. But if you don't know that, you'll give everything you have, even to starving to death, to help pay for a pretty building that God says, you think I'm contained in a building? It's almost insulting. No
Correct.
matter how beautiful you make it, I'm not going to dwell there. I may dwell in the people who go in that building, or I may
Sure.
not,
Yeah.
but it's the
That's
people he sees as beautiful.
correct. That's why, I'm a big believer in church without walls. And I remember when KGB agents were searching our apartment before they arrested my dad. I remember, like today, I was still little, so I stayed with my grandma at home. So when they came in, I'm up one. I'm one out of six, right, siblings. So all of my older brothers, sisters, they all were at school, college, whatever. And the thing that they looked the most to find as evidence in our home was trying to get all the Bibles out of the house, and they used that the stacks of Bibles that my father sneaked into the country through Western from Western countries. That was their main evidence when they did, hearing to sentence him. And the prosecutor, in his case, said, I'm going to put Vasily into the prison, and I'm going to put a last Bible found in his home in our museum. And this is going to be the end for Protestant movement. So that's just shows you to, like, we didn't have no church building at that time, right? We didn't have no structure per se, like, boards, this and that. But I think at that time the church was stronger than ever
Yeah.
because, they just relied on what they have read in the scriptures, and they try to live based on what they have. And that's why I think the church is coming back to that place, where it's all gonna be about us going out there and showing Christ through our work, how we help and how we shine in the middle of the darkness in this. It's not about $1 billion buildings and structures, because in the end of the day, it's all gonna stay here. Eternal is what we're gonna take with us once we go to heaven. Is based on how we and how many lives we have impacted while on this earth.
When the COVID-19 hit and there was a big to do about the state here being dictating that people couldn't go to church because they couldn't be in the proximity of 6 feet of other people. Some people accepted it. Eventually they pivoted to online services, but there was a big to do in the Protestant evangelical world is the state can't tell us what to do. We can go to church if we want to. And outside of that debate, I thought, no matter what causes it, if the state comes down and doesn't let Christians gather in buildings anymore, unless it's a state controlled religion, may be the best thing that ever happens to the West, because it'll put us back into who's really following Christ. Do you think it's that building? They were so tied to their buildings, and I get it because it's become business. They have salaries to pay, they have bills to pay, but they acted like it's do or die. We can't have services without this building. And I thought the early church never did. And it's places like you're talking about that grow and explode and have revivals because you do have KGB. It used to be the Romans. At one time, it could have been the Nazis or it could have been whoever, but maybe in the US, it's going to be our own government that you can't have a Bible and you can't meet in places or whatever. It'll be the best thing that ever happened to us if we're huddled in homes, because it'll weed out, the real and the
On
not real, and it becomes real. They'll realize the church is here wherever we bring the church into that building. We don't go to church.
Yeah, I mean, listen, is we work right now in Ukraine with over 100 different volunteering groups, and they go and they bring aid and help to a lot of people on the front line, right? So the kind of miracle they have been experiencing, where I was listening to I was talking to one of our volunteers. He was telling, like, right when in the like first 2 months of the full scale war, they were driving from western Ukraine, bringing aid to Mariupol city that's already right now under Russian control. And they got a call. They have only 45 minutes to get to the city before it's going to be circled by Russian forces. And he was telling that they come to this to this road on the top of the mountains on their van, and as they about to drive down, they see on the side a Russian tank, right, right there, and then they were just like praying, saying, "God, make us invisible, so we can get through this road," because they could not come back already. Because, and the funny thing, he says that as they were passing, it felt like the tank didn't even see them. Just so there's so many miracles how when you take all that nonsense away, right, and you only depend on God and His sovereignty, the way He does things, and the reason why Ukraine still stands is because it's a miracle, because in the end of the day, it's like a David versus Goliath. Russia always dubbed themselves as the second army of the world. And when you look back, Western aid was not coming into Ukraine until to like May or June of 2022. So that first 5-6 months, us standing against Russian army, it was nothing but a miracle that I do believe that angels were fighting on behalf of Ukrainian soldiers to hold that back, because otherwise, right now there would be no Ukraine as a nation, as a sovereign nation.
Yeah. So you started to say what Hope for Ukraine does. Explain a little more on the scope of it, because it's large. How long it's been around, and what you've accomplished, and how could people help if they're interested?
Yeah, so we've been on the ground since 2016. We've been handling a lot of medical support projects, helping families with food kits, with housing. And then when the full-scale war started on February 2022, we've just been completely overwhelmed by the amount of requests. So right now, at the present time, we run one of the biggest feeding program in Ukraine. So we're providing about 1,500 food kits to families each week, where the food kit can feed the family of up to four people up to 7 days. We also run a refugee center in Lviv, Ukraine, where the families who flee war zone can find a temporary shelter, while we work with our partners and volunteers trying to find a permanent home. And also we involved in a lot of educational projects, children projects, trying to give some hope for children who are suffering right now in Ukraine by giving them access to good after school programs, so they can get their mind away from what's going on around them and just be children and just enjoy things like children would normally do: paint, draw, play with their friends. So that's our three main things that we're involved in Ukraine right now.
Yeah. And once again, this faith isn't about, well, it doesn't exclude, but fancy buildings and putting all of our money into a shiny building. Our true religion is helping the kids without parents, putting food in people's stomachs, and taking care of widows, and making sure people in need have what they want. So I appreciate your work. And where could people website be the best place to find out more?
Yeah, you can go to our website, hfu.org. You can always find us on Instagram, Facebook, Hope for Ukraine. Yeah, so if you want to learn more about what we do, you can, on our website, we have a daily impact page, which I think is pretty unique for nonprofit, where we let people know every day exactly what's happening on the ground and how the funds are spent, who's been helped. So it's a very good resource for anyone who wants to know exactly what are the needs and how those needs are being met. And they can go there every day. There is new content to check it out.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for your insights and the work you do with Hope for Ukraine and for coming on today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Counted among the outlaws, he said, "Come, follow me." People from all walks of life since have been becoming outlaws.